You think discipline is about waking up earlier, grinding harder, or forcing yourself to live like a machine. But let me tell you the uncomfortable truth. The real reason your life is stuck is not because you lack motivation. It is because you keep negotiating with your excuses. You promise yourself tomorrow. You bargain with your habits, and you call it being realistic. Meanwhile, your potential is sitting in the waiting room, wondering when you will finally get serious. Discipline is not punishment. It is the highest form of self-respect. When you understand that, everything changes. Stay with me, because in the next moments we are going to dismantle the lies you have been telling yourself about discipline and replace them with something far more powerful. Most people believe discipline is a battlefield fought in the mind, a dramatic war between desire and resistance, but the truth is far less glamorous and far more revealing. Discipline is built in the quiet, ordinary moments where nobody is applauding you, nobody is judging you, and nobody is keeping score but you. And that is why it's so difficult, not because it's complex, but because it exposes exactly who you are when the spotlight is off. Discipline is the quiet architect designing the life you keep saying you want, and it starts with the smallest, simplest promises you make to yourself. Those tiny commitments are where the roots of greatness grow. Here's the truth. People fail not because they attempt too little, but because they attempt too much in one overwhelming leap. They think discipline means reinventing their entire existence overnight, as if transformation happens with one grand gesture. But discipline is not a dramatic explosion. It's a steady drip, a drip of effort, a drip of intention, a drip of consistency that over time cuts through excuses the way water cuts through stone. When you understand that, everything becomes simpler, not easier, but clearer. Self-discipline begins with one principle. Small commitments shape big destinies. Most people dismiss this idea because their pride wants something more spectacular. They think 5 minutes of exercise is pointless, that reading one page is insignificant, that changing one small habit won't create impact. But in reality, those tiny commitments are doing something profound. They're teaching your mind that you can be trusted, that you follow through, that you do what you said you would do. And once your mind believes that, discipline becomes less of a struggle and more of an identity. Here's the truth no one tells you. Every small promise you keep is a vote for the person you want to become, and every small promise you break is a vote for the person you're trying to leave behind. This is why small commitments matter. They calibrate your identity. They condition your character. They reveal what you are willing to tolerate from yourself. Think about the last time you said, "I'll start tomorrow." You weren't postponing the task. You were postponing your identity. You were delaying the version of you that you claim you want to become. And every delay makes that identity harder to reach, not because the task grows, but because your belief in yourself shrinks. That belief or the lack of it is what determines your future far more than your talent or ambition. Let me tell you why small commitments are powerful. They're achievable. They bypass the fear of failure and the exhaustion of overthinking. They give you quick wins, and those wins create momentum. Momentum creates confidence. Confidence creates action, and repeated action creates discipline. It's a chain reaction, and the first link is incredibly small. You don't build a skyscraper by lifting the whole building at once. You build it brick by brick, but you place the first brick with intention. Imagine a person who wants to transform their life, build a business, strengthen their health, grow their income, reshape their identity. They buy books, they watch motivational videos, they write big plans, but they never master the smallest commitment, starting. And because they never start, they never become. This is where so many people get stuck, not in lack of ambition, but in lack of small action. Here's the truth. When you keep even the tiniest promise daily, you are rewiring your mind for discipline. You are proving to yourself that your word has weight. And when your word has weight, your future has structure. When your word is weak, your future is uncertain. That is why discipline is not about perfection. It is about agreement, an internal agreement between who you are and who you say you will be. Let me give you a metaphor. Think of discipline as a snowball rolling down a hill. At the top, it's tiny, almost laughable. But with every small rotation, it gathers more weight, more size, more power. Before long, that tiny snowball becomes a force that can knock down obstacles that once seemed immovable. But none of that happens unless you push the snowball on day one, even if that push is weak, clumsy, or small. Another truth, small commitments are your training ground for bigger battles. If you cannot keep a 5-minute promise to yourself, how will you handle a 5-year goal? If you cannot control the small impulses like hitting snooze, procrastinating, or indulging in distractions, how will you resist the bigger temptations that threaten to derail your dreams? Discipline scales with practice, not wishful thinking. And here's something even deeper. The small commitments you avoid are usually the ones that matter most, because they're not just tasks, they're mirrors. When you avoid them, you're avoiding the truth about yourself. But when you face them, even in small doses, you reclaim authority over your life. Picture this: a person who wants to get in shape, but feels intimidated by the gym, so instead of forcing themselves into an extreme routine, they begin with a single daily walk. At first, it seems too small to matter, but it matters immensely, because the walk builds a habit, the habit builds a mindset, the mindset builds an identity, and identity is what sustains discipline long after motivation fades. After a few weeks, that person begins to upgrade their habits naturally, not because they feel pressured, but because they feel aligned. This is the hidden magic of small commitments. They turn discipline from a burden into a rhythm. Once something becomes part of your rhythm, it becomes automatic. And once it becomes automatic, your life changes without requiring constant force or mental strain. But you must guard one thing carefully: breaking small commitments. Most people underestimate the damage they cause. When you break a small promise to yourself, you send a message to your subconscious: my word is optional. And if your word is optional, your dreams become optional too. This erosion of self-trust is the silent assassin of discipline. So start small. Start with something you cannot fail. Start with something that reinforces belief, because belief is the real engine behind discipline. And remember this: you are not supposed to feel perfect when you begin. You are supposed to feel imperfect, because you're growing, you are stretching, you are transforming. The frustration you feel in the beginning is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of construction. You are building the architecture of a new self. Small commitments are not about the task itself. They are about what the task builds inside you. They build patience. They build resilience. They build identity. And the identity you build becomes the destiny you walk toward. This is where discipline truly begins, not in massive action, but in deliberate, consistent, small action. If you listen closely, you'll notice something remarkable about people who transform their lives. They rarely start with the big things. They start with the tiny hinge that swings the giant door. Because once the small commitments begin shaping your daily rhythm, a deeper question rises to the surface. A question most people avoid because it exposes the truth about their life. What actually matters? You cannot talk about discipline without talking about priorities. Discipline without direction is like running with great speed toward a destination you never intended to reach. It feels productive, but it leaves you empty. And that is why so many disciplined people still fail. They are committed, but committed to the wrong things. Here's the truth that punches a hole in the way most people live. Your life does not get better when you do more. It gets better when you choose better. You can fill your entire day with effort, but if the effort is scattered, undisciplined, or pointed toward the wrong targets, you will collapse in exhaustion without gaining progress. This is why small commitments were only the beginning. They were preparing you for the real test, deciding what deserves your energy and what does not. Because nothing destroys discipline faster than drowning in tasks that don't matter. Imagine your life as a jar. If you fill it first with the sand, the trivial tasks, the distractions, the obligations that don't nourish your future, then when it's time to place your big rocks, the things that matter most, There is no space left. This is how people lose decades without realizing it. They live filled with sand. They wake up rushing, spend their day reacting, fall asleep drained, and wonder why nothing changes. It is because they have mastered movement, not meaning. And movement without meaning is the greatest trap of the modern world. Let me tell you why this happens. Most people fear stillness. In stillness, you must face your unanswered questions, your postponed dreams, your neglected goals. Busyness becomes a shield, a way to avoid responsibility by hiding behind activity. But discipline demands the opposite. Discipline demands clarity. It asks you to stop, to breathe, to look at your life honestly and ask, what is essential? What is noise? What deserves my yes? And what must finally receive my no? These questions terrify people because they require courage, the courage to disappoint others, to walk away from distractions, to choose intention over approval. But without this courage, discipline has no direction. Here's the truth. If everything is important, then nothing is important. The person who masters discipline is not the one who does the most. It is the one who decides which few things are worth doing with full heart, full intention, full presence. That is the difference between a life of pressure and a life of progress. Picture someone who says they want to achieve financial freedom, build meaningful relationships, and improve their health. These are noble goals, but their calendar is filled with low-value activities, endless scrolling, meaningless conversations, unplanned days, obligations they accepted out of guilt, not purpose. Their time is full, but their life is empty. They mistake activity for direction, and so every year feels like a replay of the last. Without prioritization, discipline cannot flourish. It becomes energy without aim. But once you identify your big rocks, everything changes. Clarity creates power. When you decide what truly matters, not what matters to the world, not what matters to your family's expectations, not what matters to your fears, but what matters to your future self, your discipline sharpens. Your actions align, your distractions lose their grip, and suddenly, life that once felt chaotic feels structured, almost peaceful. Because you are no longer living by reaction, you are living by intention. Let me tell you why this shift is so transformative. When you choose your big rocks, you give your discipline a home, you give your effort a reason. And effort without reason is the fastest way to burnout. But effort with reason, that is where resilience is born. This is why successful people often seem calm even under pressure. It's not because life is easier for them. It's because they are not fighting unnecessary battles. They are not pouring energy into the trivial. They channel their discipline deliberately, strategically, intelligently. They understand that saying yes to everything is the same as saying yes to nothing. And so they embrace the power of no, not as rejection, but as protection. Protection of their time, their energy, their dreams. And here is something deeper. Once your priorities become clear, your small commitments create exponential results. Because now each small action is aligned. There is no wasted motion. The 5 minutes of exercise points toward the body you want. The single page of reading points toward the mind you want. The intentional morning routine points toward the life you want. Priorities turn small actions into meaningful investments instead of random effort. Here's the truth. Priorities are not found. They are chosen. And the moment you choose them with clarity and conviction, discipline becomes less of a battle and more of a path that leads you toward the type of person you promised yourself you would one day become. There comes a point on the journey of discipline where you can no longer rely on sheer force, willpower, or emotional intensity to keep you going. Willpower is like a muscle, and muscles fatigue. They tremble, they weaken, they give out. This is why so many people start strong on Monday and collapse by Thursday. The spirit is willing, but the system is missing. Discipline sustained by emotion alone burns out quickly. But discipline anchored in habits becomes automatic, reliable, almost effortless over time. And this is the turning point where your life begins to transform, not through struggle, but through structure. Here's a truth most people don't want to hear. You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your habits. You can dream of success, visualize growth, write affirmations, make vision boards filled with desire and ambition, but none of it matters if your daily habits contradict your dreams. A person who wants financial freedom but cannot control small spending will never build wealth. A person who wants a strong mind but never feeds it knowledge will always feel lost. A person who wants confidence but avoids challenge will always feel insecure. Your habits are the quiet votes you cast every day for the person you are becoming. And here's the truth. Habits don't care about your mood. They don't negotiate with your excuses. They don't require you to feel motivated. They operate regardless of how you feel. This is why the most disciplined people in the world rarely talk about motivation, because they're not waiting for it. They have built habits that carry them forward when their emotions fluctuate. They don't hope their life will change. They create systems that make change inevitable. Building habits begins with something deceptively simple. Start small enough that you cannot fail. The mind resists big change, but it welcomes small steps. 5 minutes of reading, a short walk, a glass of water instead of soda. These micro habits seem insignificant, but they bypass resistance. They slip past the gatekeeper of procrastination. They help you build momentum without triggering fear or overwhelm. And once momentum begins, even in the smallest form, your life shifts. Momentum is the closest thing to magic you will ever experience in self-discipline. Imagine trying to push a heavy car. At the beginning, the effort is enormous, almost impossible. It barely moves. But once the wheels start rolling, even slightly, the force required decreases dramatically. Habits work the same way. The hardest part is the beginning, the initiation, the first repetition, the first act of consistency. But after that, the wheels turn more easily. Here's why your habits matter. They free your mind. Every decision you make consumes energy. And most people drain their energy deciding what they already know they should do. Should I exercise today? Should I read tonight? Should I work on my goals now or later? Decision fatigue kills discipline. But when something becomes a habit, the decision disappears. Action becomes the default. You eliminate friction, and the energy you once wasted is now used for progress. One of the most powerful ways to build habits is through identity. Don't just try to act disciplined, become the type of person who is disciplined. A person who sees themselves as a reader doesn't struggle to read. A person who sees themselves as an athlete doesn't resist exercise. A person who sees themselves as a builder of their own future doesn't procrastinate on their goals. When your identity shifts, your behavior follows naturally. This is why small commitments matter, because they are tiny identities practiced daily. Another habit-building tool is something called habit stacking. Attach a new habit to an existing one. Right after your morning coffee, read 1 page. Right after brushing your teeth, do 5 push-ups. Right after sitting at your desk, write 1 sentence. You are leveraging routines you already have to build new ones. This is discipline without struggle. It is discipline by design. But one of the greatest forces in habit formation is environment. Your environment is always shaping you, whether you realize it or not. If your kitchen is filled with unhealthy foods, discipline becomes a battle. If your workspace is cluttered with distractions, focus becomes impossible. If your phone is within reach, your attention will be stolen. Successful people rearrange their environment to make good habits easy and bad habits difficult. They don't rely on hoping they engineer their surroundings for success. Here's the truth. You will always become a product of your environment. So shape it before it shapes you. Let me give you a deeper insight. The habits you refuse to break are often the very things holding your future hostage. The late night scrolling, the mindless entertainment, the unnecessary purchases, the conversations that drain you, these are not harmless. They are thieves. Thieves of time, thieves of energy, thieves of potential. And most people do not lose their future in one catastrophic moment. They lose it in small, repeated choices that slowly erode their discipline until nothing of substance remains. But the moment you build habits, real, consistent, structured habits, your future begins to repair itself. Because habits are not just actions, they are replacements. Each good habit replaces a destructive one. Each consistent action rewrites a self-limiting belief. Each repeated effort strengthens your identity. And identity is what carries you through storm after storm. Habits also create something priceless: stability. When your life has rhythm, you become harder to shake. When your days have structure, you become harder to distract. When your actions repeat automatically, you become harder to discourage. Chaos destroys discipline. Structure preserves it. And here's something deeper: habits compound. One small action won't change your life today, but repeated hundreds of times, it will redesign your destiny. Just as water wears down mountains drop by drop, your habits shape your character repetition by repetition. Discipline is not built in dramatic moments, it is built in the quiet repetition of ordinary choices. But let me warn you, habits require patience. Most people quit too early because they don't see immediate results. But discipline is never rewarded instantly. Your small efforts are seeds, and seeds do not sprout the moment you put them in the soil. They grow underground first, developing roots, progress you cannot see, strength you cannot measure yet, identity forming quietly. That is the invisible work of discipline. And if you stay consistent just long enough, something extraordinary happens. The habit becomes part of you. What once required effort now requires none. What once felt heavy now feels natural. What once felt impossible now feels inevitable. This is the turning point where discipline stops being a struggle and becomes your advantage. There is a moment on every journey of discipline when you meet the greatest test of all, the temptation to choose what feels good now over what will feel extraordinary later. And make no mistake, this moment comes for everyone. It arrives quietly, disguised as comfort, as convenience, as relief. It whispers, "You've done enough. You deserve a break. This one time won't matter." But here's the truth most people never confront. Your future is built in the moments where nobody is watching, and everything inside you wants the easier path. What you choose in those moments determines who you become. Delayed gratification is not a concept, it is a character trait. It is the ability to hold your desire in your hands, acknowledge it, appreciate it, and then set it aside because something greater is calling you forward. It is one of the strongest predictors of success, yet one of the rarest disciplines to master. People fail not because they lack talent, intelligence, or opportunity, but because they surrender to short-term pleasure. They trade the life they want most for the feeling they want now. And when tomorrow arrives, they blame the world instead of the choices they made in private. Here's the truth. The universe does not reward intensity. It rewards consistency. It rewards the person who chooses the long game over the impulse. The person who understands that every small sacrifice today is an investment in a future self, a future life, a future reward far greater than the momentary comfort they resisted. And those rewards, when they come, do not come silently. They come with dignity, strength, confidence, and a sense of ownership over your destiny that can only be earned through patience. To delay gratification, you must begin with clarity. You must know exactly what you're working toward. A dream that is vague will always lose to a desire that is immediate. You cannot resist the pull of comfort if the future you're chasing is blurry, undefined, or shallow. That is why the first step is to build a vision so vivid, so emotionally charged, that it pulls you through the moments when your discipline feels weak. When you can see where you're going, not just with your eyes, but with your spirit, the sacrifices stop feeling like losses. They become choices that align you with your destiny. Imagine someone who wants to build financial independence. The temptation is everywhere: spontaneous purchases, entertainment, quick pleasure, and yet every time they choose not to indulge, they are not depriving themselves, They are constructing a foundation. Every dollar saved becomes a brick. Every impulse resisted becomes reinforcement. And one day, they wake up living inside a structure they built one small disciplined choice at a time. That is the power of delayed gratification. But here's where most people go wrong. They try to resist temptation with willpower alone, and willpower, while noble, is unreliable. It gets tired, it gets emotional, it gets overwhelmed. To delay gratification consistently, you must redesign your environment. Remove the temptations. Build systems that make it hard to fall and easy to rise. A person who wants to eat healthier should not surround themselves with unhealthy foods and hope to stay disciplined. A person who wants to focus should not keep their phone within reach and hope to avoid distraction. Environment is stronger than intention always. The wise don't test their discipline, they protect it. Another strategy is the pause. When temptation appears, don't react, don't indulge, don't decide. Simply pause, breathe, count the cost, see the future. Ask yourself, what does the best version of me choose right now? Even 10 seconds of awareness can dissolve the impulse that felt overwhelming a moment earlier. This pause becomes a muscle, a habit, a shield. Over time, the temptations lose their intensity, not because the world changes, but because you change. And here's a profound truth. Delayed gratification is a form of self-trust. Every time you choose long-term reward over short-term pleasure, you are telling yourself, I believe in my future. I believe in my potential. I believe I am worthy of more than what this moment offers. But every time you give in, you break that trust, even if only slightly. You teach your mind that your future can be sacrificed for convenience. And once your mind learns that pattern, discipline becomes nearly impossible. Let me give you a metaphor. Think of your future as a garden. Every disciplined choice is a seed. Every sacrifice is water. Every delayed gratification is sunlight. But if you dig up the soil every time you feel impatient, nothing will grow. That is how most people live, constantly digging, constantly restarting, constantly sabotaging their own harvest. They wonder why nothing blooms. The answer is simple. They never stayed patient long enough. Patience is not waiting passively. Patience is active. It is choosing to move forward without immediate reward, trusting that the invisible work inside you is building something extraordinary. The athlete training early in the morning with no audience, that is patience. The entrepreneur working late into the night, unseen, that is patience. The person saving money while everyone else spends, that is patience. The student reading one page a day, even when it seems meaningless, that is patience. And those who master this principle eventually achieve what seems miraculous to others. Here's the truth. Everything meaningful in life requires discomfort at the beginning and delight at the end. Everything meaningless offers delight at the beginning and discomfort at the end. Once you understand this, the world becomes simple. The hard choices create the easy life. The easy choices create the hard life. You cannot avoid this equation. You can only choose your side of it. And let me warn you gently, the greatest danger is not choosing pleasure. The greatest danger is believing that your choices don't matter. Believing that one distraction, one indulgence, one break in the pattern is harmless. But discipline is not destroyed in one day. It erodes gradually, one compromise at a time. The same way a powerful structure collapses from tiny cracks, not from one dramatic blow. Protect your discipline by protecting the small choices, because they accumulate faster than you think. When you delay gratification consistently, something remarkable happens. You begin to trust yourself again. You begin to see yourself as capable, strong, reliable. Confidence rises. Clarity rises. Momentum rises. And eventually, the temptations that once seemed irresistible lose their power, not because you forced yourself to resist, but because you have outgrown them. This is the essence of delayed gratification, not suffering, but elevation, not denial, but direction, not punishment, but preparation. You are not giving something up. You are trading up, trading short-term comfort for long-term greatness, trading impulses for identity, trading the life you have for the life you truly want. And that is the moment discipline stops feeling like restriction and starts feeling like freedom. There comes a time on the path of discipline when you must graduate from good intentions into structured living. Because no matter how inspired you feel, no matter how powerful your goals are, your life will always drift back into chaos unless you give it a structure strong enough to hold your ambition. A routine is not a cage, it is a blueprint. It is the quiet architecture that carries your discipline when your emotions fluctuate. And if there is one truth you must engrave into your mind, it is this: your routine is the strongest predictor of your future. People often misunderstand structure. They think a routine restricts their freedom. They fear that too much order will suffocate their creativity or remove the spontaneity from life. But look closely. The people with the greatest discipline, the greatest accomplishments, and the greatest inner peace follow routines, not because they love rigidity, but because they understand a universal truth structure creates space for clarity, space for growth, space for excellence. When your life is scattered, so is your power. But when your days are organized, your potential becomes focused, channeled, sharpened. Here's the truth most people avoid. Your days are telling the truth about your future long before your results show up. If your days are chaotic, your future will be chaotic. If your days are disciplined, your future will be disciplined. And if your days are shaped with intention, your future will unfold with intention. You cannot escape this. Life will never rise higher than your daily structure. A strong routine begins with clarity. You must know what you want your life to become, not vaguely, not someday, not when things get better, but now with precision. Without clarity, your routine becomes nothing more than a list of random habits. But with clarity, it becomes a guided path, a map that takes you from who you are to who you intend to be. That is why so many people fail. They build routines without building purpose. And without purpose, discipline collapses. Once your why is clear, your structure begins to take shape. And it often begins in the morning, the sacred hour, when the world is quiet and your mind is most honest. How you start your morning is a declaration of your priorities. The disciplined do not roll into their day. They enter it with intention. Maybe it's reading, maybe it's movement, maybe it's journaling, prayer, silence, or planning. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it awakens your mind and aligns your spirit. When you start your day deliberately, the rest of the day bends in your favor. But here's another truth. The evening routine matters just as much, because your nights prepare your mornings. An evening routine is not about productivity, it is about alignment. It is the moment you reflect, recalibrate, and release the noise of the day. When you close the day with intention, you open tomorrow with clarity. You sleep deeper, you think clearer, you move with sharper focus. Success does not begin when the sun rises, it begins when the previous day ends. Structure also protects you from one of the deadliest enemies of discipline: decision fatigue. Every unplanned day forces you to decide repeatedly what you should be doing, and every decision drains your willpower. Without routine, you waste energy trying to create the day instead of using that energy to transform your life. A routine eliminates unnecessary decisions so the important ones receive your full strength. This is the hidden power of structure. It frees your mind to focus on what matters. But here's where most people make a mistake. They build routines that are too large, too complex, too perfect on paper, but impossible in real life. Discipline collapses under the weight of unrealistic expectations. A strong routine is built slowly, intentionally, piece by piece. You start with one pillar, maybe your mornings, then another, maybe your planning, then another, maybe your reading or your exercise. Over time, the pieces interlock into a rhythm that feels natural, almost effortless. This is how routines become part of your identity instead of part of your struggle. And yet, even the best routines must remain flexible. Life is unpredictable. Unexpected events will come. Emergencies will arise. And if your routine is too rigid, you will break under the pressure. But if your routine has flexibility built inside it, you will bend without breaking. Discipline is not about perfect execution. It is about consistent return. A flexible routine allows you to adapt without losing direction. Here's another truth. Boundaries protect routines. Without boundaries, your time is invaded. Your attention is stolen. Your priorities are diluted. To maintain discipline, you must learn the art of no, not out of arrogance, but out of responsibility. Because every time you say yes to something meaningless, you are saying no to something meaningful. Your routine is only as strong as your boundaries. Let me give you an example. Imagine someone who wants to build a business, improve their health, and strengthen their mind. Without boundaries, each day becomes filled with distractions, phone notifications, unimportant favors, social obligations, tasks that eat away chunks of time but produce nothing valuable. But when they set boundaries, designated work hours, protected mornings, limited screen time, intentional breaks, suddenly their routine becomes a fortress. Their life gains direction. Their mind gains peace. Their discipline gains power. Accountability strengthens routines even further. When you share your goals and structure with someone you trust, you create an external mirror, a mirror that reflects your commitment back to you, not to judge you, but to remind you. The most disciplined people in the world often have partners, mentors, or communities who strengthen their commitment by walking alongside them. Accountability is not dependence, it is reinforcement. And then there is tracking. A routine without tracking is like a journey without a map. You may move, but you don't know if you're moving in the right direction. Tracking your habits, your progress, your consistency creates awareness. And awareness creates growth. There is something powerful about seeing your progress on paper or on a calendar. It becomes tangible, undeniable. You begin to witness your own transformation brick by brick. But perhaps the most beautiful truth about routines is this: they multiply your identity. As your routine becomes stronger, you become stronger. As your structure becomes clearer, your purpose becomes clearer. As your days become intentional, your life becomes intentional. A routine is not about controlling time. It is about elevating your life. It is about refusing to live accidentally. It is about choosing to live deliberately. And when your routine becomes part of you, discipline becomes effortless. Your dreams no longer feel distant. They feel scheduled. They feel inevitable, because your life is no longer shaped by chance or chaos, but by the quiet daily rhythm of someone who is building their future with their own hand. There is a truth about discipline that most people spend their whole lives running from, a truth so uncomfortable, so confronting, that even hearing it makes many people turn away. Growth demands discomfort. Not occasionally. Not when you feel strong. Always. Every breakthrough in your life will require you to step into a space that feels unfamiliar, uncertain, and uncomfortable. And this is where the majority of people stop, not because they are incapable, but because they are unwilling to feel the discomfort required to rise. Discomfort is not the enemy. Discomfort is the signal. It is the doorway between the life you have and the life you want. But here's the paradox. The comfort zone feels safe, yet it's the most dangerous place you can stay. Nothing grows there. Nothing strengthens there. Nothing evolves there. It is a silent trap, a beautiful prison decorated with convenience. And if you stay there too long, your dreams begin to suffocate quietly, slowly, invisibly. Let me tell you something you may not want to hear, but desperately need to understand. Comfort is killing more dreams than failure ever has. People don't fail because they try and fall. They fail because they never step into the spaces that demand courage. They choose what's easy over what's meaningful. They protect their comfort instead of protecting their potential. Here's the truth. The path to mastery is paved with discomfort. Every new skill, every new habit, every new identity requires you to stretch, and stretching is uncomfortable. But this discomfort is not punishment, it is preparation. It is shaping you, strengthening you, carving out the version of yourself capable of holding the future you desire. Without discomfort, discipline has no oxygen. Think of a muscle. If you want it to grow, you must exert pressure. You must push it to the edge of fatigue. You must make it burn. But that burn is not harm, it is transformation. Your discipline is exactly the same. Every time you face discomfort with courage instead of avoidance, you are stretching your capacity. You are increasing your resilience. You are shaping a version of yourself that can walk through storms instead of being blown away by them. Discomfort is the training ground of discipline. But here's what makes discomfort so powerful. It tells the truth about who you are. When everything is easy, everyone looks disciplined, everyone looks confident, everyone looks committed. It is only when things become difficult, when you feel resistance, fear, boredom, frustration, that your true discipline reveals itself. Discomfort exposes the gap between who you think you are and who you actually are. And that exposure is a gift, because once you see the gap, you can close it. The people who master discomfort are not fearless. They are simply willing to feel the uncertainty, willing to feel the awkwardness, willing to feel the sweat, the strain, the stretch, willing to fail publicly, privately, repeatedly, willing to endure the temporary pain required to access permanent growth. They understand a truth most people never learn. The discomfort you avoid becomes the boundary of your life. The discomfort you embrace becomes the doorway to your expansion. But here's something deeper. Discomfort shrinks when you walk toward it. Fear grows when you run from it. When you willingly enter discomfort, it begins to lose its power. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. What once intimidated you becomes routine. What once scared you becomes normal. You grow into the person who was once too small for the life you now hold. This is why successful people seek discomfort on purpose. They do not wait for life to challenge them, they challenge themselves. They step into cold mornings, difficult conversations, challenging projects, ambitious goals. They train their mind and body to operate outside ease. And because they practice discomfort regularly, they become stable, adaptable, unshakable. When adversity strikes, they're not surprised, they're prepared. But the average person, they avoid discomfort at all costs. They choose the warm bed over the early start. They choose distraction over discipline. They choose entertainment over improvement. And each small avoidance becomes a brick in the wall, separating them from the life they want. They do not realize that every comfort they cling to is silently stealing their potential. Let me give you a metaphor. Imagine your potential as a treasure chest buried behind a wall of discomfort. Most people see the wall and walk away. A few push on it lightly, then retreat. But the disciplined, they break through the wall. Yes, their hands bleed. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's painful. But on the other side is a life they once thought was out of reach. Not because they were stronger or luckier or smarter, but because they were willing to do what others refused to do. Here's another truth most never accept. Discomfort is temporary, but quitting lasts forever. The pain you feel from stretching yourself will fade. The sweat dries. The breath returns. The fatigue passes. But the regret of giving up too soon, that can last a lifetime, and it usually does. Regret is simply the echo of the discomfort you ran from. The moment you embrace discomfort, something profound shifts inside you. You stop waiting for life to get easier and instead decide to get stronger. You stop avoiding challenges and begin seeking growth. You stop fearing the hard moments and start seeing them as invitations to rise, to expand, to evolve. And slowly, something beautiful happens. The discomfort that once terrified you becomes your teacher, your mentor, your sculptor. You begin to crave growth, not comfort. You begin to measure your days not by how easy they felt, but by how much you stretched. You begin to realize that discomfort is not a threat, it is the birthplace of the person you are meant to become. This is where discipline transforms into identity. When you no longer endure discomfort reluctantly but embrace it willingly, you have crossed a line that few ever cross. You have entered the territory of people who build extraordinary lives, not because life is easier for them, but because they have learned to welcome the very thing others avoid. Discomfort is not the barrier, it is the bridge. At the end of every journey of discipline, there comes a moment of truth, a moment where you stand face to face with the life you have built and the life you could still build. A moment when you can no longer blame your circumstances, your past, your upbringing, your luck, or the world around you. A moment when the mirror becomes honest. And in that honesty, you finally realize something powerful, something liberating, something almost earth-shaking. Your life is not determined by your potential. Your life is determined by your discipline. Potential is a promise. Discipline is the fulfillment of that promise. Potential whispers what is possible. Discipline declares what will be. And all this time, you weren't fighting laziness or fear or distraction. You were fighting an old version of yourself, a version built on excuses, on hesitation, on comfort, on stories you repeated so often you began to believe them. But that version is not you, not the real you, not the you that was built for something bigger, something stronger, something meaningful. Here's the truth most people never accept. Discipline is not a punishment. It is a form of self-respect. It is choosing the future you deserve over the impulses that rob you of it. It is choosing to rise when comfort begs you to settle. It is choosing to grow even when growth feels like struggle. Every technique you've learned, from small commitments to prioritizing what matters, from habit building to delaying gratification, from structured routines to embracing discomfort, they were never separate steps. They were a single path leading you back to your greatest strength, your ability to choose the person you become. Think about it. Every day, you are casting votes. Votes for discipline or for distraction. Votes for growth or for stagnation. Votes for your future or for your past. Most people never notice the votes because they are so small, so subtle, so ordinary. But those votes accumulate. They compound. They build the architecture of your destiny. And the day will come sooner than you think when you look around and realize that your life is no longer built by accident. It is built by intention. You wake up with clarity. You move with purpose. You take action without negotiating with your feelings. You face challenges with steadiness rather than fear. You honor your word even when no one is watching. And that is when everything changes. Success stops feeling like something outside of you, something lucky, something unpredictable, something reserved for the chosen few. It begins to feel inevitable, unavoidable, natural, because it is flowing from the person you have become, not the person you used to be. And here's the greatest truth of all. Discipline does not just change what you achieve. It changes who you are. It sharpens your character. It strengthens your confidence. It deepens your resilience. It expands your courage. It aligns your actions with your purpose. It frees you from the prison of your old habits and delivers you into a life you once believed was out of reach. You become the person others look at and say, of course they succeeded. They earned it. They lived it. They chose it. But discipline will always ask you one final question, the question that stands between an ordinary life and an extraordinary one. Are you willing to take ownership? Not someday. Not when life gets easier. Not when motivation returns. Now. Because discipline is built today, in this moment, with the decision you make next. Will you honor the commitments you set? Will you take the small step instead of waiting for a perfect plan? Will you prioritize what matters most instead of drowning in the noise? Will you build habits that automate your success instead of relying on hope? Will you delay gratification and choose the life you want over the feeling you want? Will you create a routine that protects your future? Will you embrace discomfort instead of running from it? If the answer is yes, truly yes, then your life will never be the same. Because once discipline becomes who you are, not what you do, you become unstoppable. Not because life gets easier, but because you get stronger. Not because obstacles disappear, but because your character outgrows them. Not because the path becomes smooth, but because your steps become sure. So here you stand, not at the end of a script, but at the beginning of a new self, a self built by choice, by courage, by repeated acts of discipline, a self capable of becoming everything you once only dreamed about. The question now is simple, powerful, and completely in your hands. What will you choose next? Comfort or the life you were meant to live?